Take your bag and get off this plane. Now." The flight attendant's voice echoed through the cabin so loudly that conversation stopped instantly. 16-year-old Nia Carter froze beside seat 4A, her boarding pass still in her hand. Dozens of passengers turned toward her. "What did I do?" she asked quietly. The attendant crossed her arms. "You know exactly what you did." Nia's face tightened with confusion. She had boarded, found a seat, and spoken to no one. Yet now she stood alone under 100 eyes. Like and subscribe to EchoStory. What happened next changed everything. The aircraft was nearly ready for departure. Business travelers checked emails. Families settled children into seats. Outside the window, baggage crews worked under the afternoon sun. Nia had been traveling alone to attend a national science competition. Her father was overseas on business, and her mother had passed away years earlier. She was quiet, polite, and unusually mature for her age. Yet from the moment she entered first class, the lead flight attendant, Vanessa Cole, seemed determined to question her presence. Twice she checked Nia's boarding pass. 3 times she questioned her seat assignment. "Please explain why I'm being removed," Nia asked. Vanessa sighed dramatically. Several passengers reported concerns. Nia looked around. People immediately shook their heads. One businessman raised an eyebrow. A woman across the aisle whispered, "I didn't report anything." Vanessa ignored them. "This discussion is over." Nia's throat tightened. Embarrassment spread through her chest like heat. But she refused to cry. She had learned that people often expected emotions from her before facts. So she stayed calm. The calmness only seemed to irritate Vanessa more. A gate supervisor arrived moments later. Vanessa immediately stepped forward. "Passenger is creating a disturbance." Nia blinked. "I haven't even left my seat." The supervisor looked confused. He checked the boarding pass. Everything was valid. Name matched. Seat matched. Identification matched. For a moment it seemed the misunderstanding might end. Then Vanessa added, "She became argumentative when questioned." Several passengers exchanged uncomfortable looks. They had witnessed the entire interaction. Nobody remembered Nia arguing. Yet authority often sounds convincing when delivered confidently. The supervisor rubbed his forehead. "Miss, perhaps we should continue this conversation outside." Nia looked down at her backpack. Inside were months of work for the competition, experiments, notes, dreams. "If I leave, I miss my event," she said softly. Vanessa shrugged. "That's not our problem." The words hit harder than the removal itself. Around the cabin, whispers spread. A teenage boy lowered his headphones. An elderly woman stared in disbelief. Even the co-pilot passing through the aisle slowed down briefly. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Nia stood slowly. The humiliation felt heavier than her backpack. Passengers watched as she gathered her belongings. Nobody shouted. Nobody protested loudly. Most people simply looked uncomfortable. The silence hurt almost as much as Vanessa's words. As Nia stepped into the aisle, her eyes met those of a young mother holding a child. The woman looked apologetic, as if she wanted to help but didn't know how. Nia forced a small smile. Then she walked toward the aircraft door. Every step felt longer than the last. At the gate, Nia sat quietly near the window overlooking the runway. The supervisor had promised to review the situation. Vanessa had returned to the aircraft satisfied. The flight was still delayed, but no one seemed concerned about the teenager now sitting alone. Nia opened her phone. Dozens of messages from teammates filled the screen. "Where are you? Boarding yet? Can't wait to see your project." She stared at them without replying. For the first time, her eyes became wet. Not from anger, from disappointment. Inside the aircraft, several passengers continued discussing what they had seen. A businessman named Richard Hayes quietly recorded a statement on his phone. "The girl did nothing wrong," he said. Nearby passengers nodded. Meanwhile, Nia remained at the gate, trying to understand what had happened. Then her phone vibrated. One message. "Dad, just landed. How's your flight?" Nia stared at the screen for several seconds. She didn't want to worry him. She didn't want help. She wanted fairness. But what happened next changed everything. Nia finally typed back. "They removed me from the plane." The response came almost instantly. "Call me." She hesitated before pressing the button. Her father answered immediately. "Nia, what happened?" She explained calmly. No exaggeration, no anger, just facts. Her father listened in complete silence. When she finished, there was a pause. Then he asked one question. "Are you okay?" Nia looked out the window. "I'm embarrassed." The silence that followed felt heavier than any words. Inside the aircraft, passengers suddenly noticed unusual movement outside. Several airport vehicles crossed the tarmac. Ground crew members pointed toward the private aviation terminal. The delayed aircraft remained at the gate. Nobody understood why. Then a sleek black private jet appeared in the distance. It taxied quickly toward a nearby stand. Curious passengers pressed against windows. Vanessa glanced outside but paid little attention. To her, the situation was over. Nia was gone. The problem had been removed, or so she thought. At the gate, Nia watched the jet arrive. Her father's voice returned through the phone. "Stay where you are," she frowned. "Dad," he sighed softly. "I'm coming." Nia looked toward the private jet and felt her stomach drop. "You flew back?" "The meeting can wait." She closed her eyes. Part of her wanted him not to come. She wanted people to treat her fairly before knowing who her father was. But that chance had already passed. 10 minutes later, a tall man stepped off the private jet surrounded by airport officials. Conversations stopped wherever he walked. Ground crews recognized him immediately. Executives hurried toward him. Richard, the businessman inside the aircraft, stared through the window. "No way," he whispered. Several passengers turned toward him. "Who is that?" Richard looked stunned. "That's James Carter." The name spread quietly through the cabin. Even the supervisor standing near the gate suddenly looked nervous. James Carter was not a celebrity. He was something far more influential in aviation. His technology company managed advanced scheduling, logistics, and operational systems used by airports and airlines across the country. Yet none of that mattered to him at this moment. He walked directly toward Nia. She stood. He hugged her tightly. No cameras. No speeches. Just a father protecting his daughter. Then he looked at the supervisor. "Explain." One word. Calm. Direct. The supervisor immediately lowered his eyes. Inside the aircraft, Vanessa finally learned who James Carter was. The color drained from her face. "You're kidding," she whispered. The captain received a call, then another. Suddenly, airline management wanted details. Every detail. Passengers watched the mood shift in real time. The confidence Vanessa displayed earlier disappeared completely. Outside, executives surrounded James, but he wasn't discussing contracts or influence. He kept returning to the same question. "Why was my daughter removed?" The supervisor replayed the events. Passenger statements emerged. Video recordings appeared. Richard shared his footage. Other travelers shared theirs too. The truth became impossible to avoid. Nia had not argued. She had not caused a disturbance. She had simply existed in a seat someone thought she didn't belong in. James listened quietly. The quieter he became, the more nervous everyone else grew. Anger is predictable. Calm disappointment is much harder to face. Airline executives boarded the aircraft personally. That alone told passengers how serious the situation had become. Vanessa stood near the galley, silent. The executive addressed the cabin. "We are reviewing an unacceptable incident involving a passenger." Nobody needed clarification. Everyone knew exactly which passenger. Outside, Nia remained beside her father. She still hadn't boarded. She still hadn't received an explanation. Yet suddenly everyone wanted to talk. Everyone wanted to listen. The executive approached Vanessa. "You need to apologize." She nodded slowly. Minutes later, Nia was invited back onto the aircraft. Passengers watched as she walked down the aisle again. This time, the atmosphere felt completely different. Vanessa stepped forward. "Nia, I'm sorry." The teenager looked at her quietly. The apology sounded sincere, but apologies always arrive after choices. And choices reveal character long before apologies appear. Nia accepted the apology with grace that surprised many adults. "Thank you," she said softly. Then she returned to her seat. Several passengers applauded. Others simply smiled. Richard nodded as she passed. The young mother from earlier whispered, "Good luck at your competition." Nia smiled for the first time all day. The tension inside the aircraft finally began to dissolve. Yet the lesson remained sitting in every seat. Before departure, James stood at the aircraft door. He could have demanded consequences. He could have made headlines. Instead, he looked toward the crew and said, "The problem isn't one mistake. It's the assumptions behind it." Then he left. No threats. No dramatic speeches. Just truth. The kind of truth that lingers long after people stop talking. Vanessa lowered her eyes. The captain looked thoughtful. Passengers remained unusually quiet. Hours later, Nia arrived at her destination. The competition awaited. So did her future. As she stepped through the terminal, she thought about everything that had happened. People had treated her differently after learning who her father was. But she hadn't changed. She was the same girl she had been that morning. EchoStory remembers moments like this because dignity should never require a powerful name, a private jet, or influence to be recognized. Respect isn't something you show when someone is powerful. It's something you show when you think they're not.